All right, it is June the 25th, to be exact. It is about 5:30 in the evening, and I'm sitting in the DA's office. I'm Larry Krasner, the Philly DA, with one of my favorite people in the world, Sujatha Baliga, I would say an international, but at least a national expert on restorative justice. So, Sujatha.
Hi, Larry.
What is restorative justice?
So, restorative justice's approach to justice that is more relational than it is punitive, right? It looks to attend to folks who've been harmed, their needs, and holding people directly accountable to those needs, with family and community supporting that. So what that can look like is face-to-face dialogue with community and family, coming together to come up with a plan to repair the harm, and also to look at root causes, how we ended up here and how we're not going to end up here again.
All right, so that's pretty conceptual. What are the nuts and bolts of what this looks like when you're actually trying to deal with Johnny, who broke into the window of Mrs. Smith and scared the heck out of her when she came home and found that a bunch of her stuff had been gone through and some things were stolen? Right
on. So let's say Johnny is climbing out the window with the TV set in his hands, and the neighbor sees it and calls the police. And at that point, the police show up, and they could, in theory, send that kid straight over to a restorative justice organization, or maybe Johnny's got a bunch of priors or something, and the case ends up on the district attorney's desk, and the DA decides that this is one of those cases that we divert to restorative justice. So there's a nonprofit organization, a community-based organization, that works with Johnny to figure out whether or not he's willing to take responsibility for that crime, and help him come to terms of what it would take to make it right. Also works with the crime victim, and helps them come up with who are their supporters and community members going to be, where they come together and literally come up with a plan together through dialogue.
So how does that work? So you have a room, you stuff people in the room, they all want to kill each other because they've gone through her window and she's still ticked off. How does this work?
Right, so for several weeks, and sometimes a couple months before they come together, there are deep conversations on all sides to make sure that people don't actually want to kill each other when they walk in the room, right? And that we've really done that by, stuff gets de-escalated by asking sort of hard questions, like how are you harmed and what do you need? Right? And whose obligation is it to meet those needs? And when you sit with a crime survivor long enough and you give them an opportunity to answer those questions, like what all was lost and what did it mean to you, and it really helps that person get clearer about what they want. Because if all that's on offer is this kid did this thing and lock him up, then sort of like you're starving for justice, that's what you'll eat, right? But if it's
sounds like a short menu in the restaurant of justice.
Yeah, but we want to have a whole lot of other stuff on that menu.
I got it. So what does Johnny do? I understand what the victim does. She explains her loss and what she needs and what she wants.
Right.
What does Johnny do?
Johnny is supported by family and community to do what she said.
Does Johnny fess up?
Johnny has to fess up. Johnny has to fess up. Johnny has to talk not only about Johnny has to tell the story to the satisfaction of the survivor and the other folks in the room, right? Especially family, community. How did you end up doing this in the first place? Like, what's this all about? Like, both in the preparatory meetings and in the circle itself. And really just look that person in the eye whose house they robbed and say, this is what I did, and this is where your stuff is, or answering their questions to their satisfaction is a huge part of it. And apologizing, making it right.
How long does it take? 2 hours, 10 hours?
It depends. Usually less than 2. I think people sort of saturate out, depending on the severity of the crime, right? That sometimes people need a lot more time to talk about all the impact of the harm. We start with, the conversation usually starts with the survivor. They get to define it. And so instead of it being like a list of all the things that he did wrong and it focuses on Johnny, it focuses on the person whose home he broke into. So they get to say, this is what happened. I walked in the door. I saw this. The story is defined actually by the person who experienced the thing, right? Not by a list of rules that Johnny broke.
All right. So, and then there is an agreement that Johnny's going to do something to try to make it up to Mrs. Smith.
Mrs. Smith.
Whatever it may be. And what if Johnny didn't do it?
If Johnny doesn't do it, there's usually reasons why, and we like to reconvene to figure out what it is. So maybe Mrs. Smith wants to come, but if it doesn't involve the part of the plan that was like, the plan has 4 parts: doing right by Mrs. Smith, doing right by Johnny's parents or guardians if he has them, doing right by the community, and doing right by yourself. Johnny has to do right by himself. What is it that he needs to do to turn his life around? So if Mrs. Smith may or may not want to be in the sort of reconvene process, but the vast majority of kids complete the plan when they are properly supported. The plan has to be really tight. It has to be really clear, called SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, related to the harm, timely? And then there's a whole column of, do you need help? Is this a setup for failure? Who is going to help you complete this? And really pulling in on family and community support, pre-existing or needs to be rekindled. There was that uncle you really loved that has that garage where you could go hang out after school instead of hanging out on that street corner where you've been getting into trouble, and he can give you a job where you make the money to pay her back for the cut screens, whatever it is when you were going in.
What if Johnny's I shouldn't say it to you because you believe in human nature. What if Johnny's a demon and Johnny just does everything wrong? Does Johnny get prosecuted?
Johnny's not a demon, but Johnny.
I knew I should have said that.
Johnny's not a demon, but Johnny would likely get prosecuted in the end, right? So while restorative justice processes are confidential, right, where nothing that's said, by agreement with you in your office, nothing that's said in these restorative processes can be used in a court of law. If the process breaks down, if Johnny jumps ship, if Johnny just doesn't do anything he's supposed to do, if Johnny refuses to participate, right? If Johnny declines participation, then you can do the thing you do.
Yes. So does it work? Does this process work? Because, we're on the East Coast. This is not the left coast. Some of us have all the answers, and they all seem to involve being punitive.
Right.
So does this actually work?
Well, we think it works better. Not just think, but we have data to show it. So the first 100 cases that we worked on out of Oakland, California, we saw a 44% reduction in re-offense, so recidivism reduction of 44%, and 91% of participating victims were satisfied with the process, very satisfied with the process.
Wow.
Would even recommend it to a friend.
So what's wrong with the regular process from the victim's perspective?
So the victim's perspective, we often feel sidelined by the process, right? So instead of asking me how I've been harmed and what do I need, I am asked to sometimes be a tool of a process that I'm not necessarily invested in or isn't going to meet my needs. And you can order restitution and this and that and the other, but it's not always easy to collect, right? Mm-hmm. We're not really setting kids up to actually make it right in the end. It really is about who is the crime committed against, right? It's committed against the state. It's the people versus so-and-so. Right? It's the people versus Johnny, not Mrs. Smith versus Johnny. And so Mrs. Smith kind of gets lost from the equation. And so I would like to see Mrs. Smith back in the equation. And what I think she feels satisfied about is that she is, right? She's centralized. So there are some prosecutors who do a better job of attending to the needs of folks who've been harmed. But in the end, I hear often from prosecutors across the nation that, it's not, this is what we like about the system. They've suffered enough and now it's ours and it's about protecting the state. And that would be maybe a useful way of thinking if we weren't seeing lower recidivism rates with restorative justice than one state.
So this hippie stuff works.
This hippie stuff works.
Wow. All right. Well, as always, great chatting with you, Sujatha.
Always. My pleasure, Larry.
We look forward to seeing this work in Philadelphia.
Woohoo!
And we'll go from there.